As long as I have followed politics, there's always been a lot of conversations about politicians lying. It's well established that politicians often share misinformation. But are all political lies equal? In some ways, yes, they're all dishonest, but in other ways, there's some significant difference between political lies that it's important for us to pay attention to. First, there are times where politicians make mistakes. All of us do that. All of us misunderstand something, misremember something, and make mistakes. This is different than two other ways that politician lies that I want to talk about a little bit more in detail. First, there is the misuse of statistics. One of my favorite books when I was going through my undergraduate degree was a little book called How to Lie with Statistics. And it goes through all the ways that people are able to manipulate statistics. Even in my graduate school, I remember my professor talking about one of the secrets to getting published is knowing how to put in just the right controls. If you control for too much or something with too much overlap, you're not going to get significant results and you're not going to get published. If you don't put in enough controls or the right controls, you're not going to be taken seriously and it's going to be dismissed. Well, there's lots of different ways that we can manipulate statistics. Some of this is through the design of the statistics. We might be looking at a biased sample or different things along these lines. Other times it can be through the interpretation of statistics. But either way, there are a lot of different ways that we can use research to lie and support many, many different positions, often positions that are different from reality. So we have to be cautious about what statistics we consume. And it's good for us to be able to critically think about those statistics because politicians will often misuse those. Now, at times too, they're going to misunderstand those. Not all politicians, as a matter of fact, most politicians are probably not trained in statistical methods, may not even be trained in how to critically um, be a critical consumer of research. So there are times where these are just mistaken. Now, there's also the ability to pick and choose the statistics we want to use. On a number of different topics, we're going to look at different agencies, often with good intention, might, for example, look at statistics about the economy and come to different conclusions. Well, politicians may choose the interpretations that are more closely aligned with what they want to be true or what supports them the best. So this is something that happens often. This is a little less malicious, I would say, than blatantly misinterpreting statistics or blatantly biasing statistics. But a lot of things happen here to distort statistics. So sometimes politicians are doing this intentionally, and when politicians intentionally use statistics to misrepresent the truth, this is something that certainly is rather nefarious. So we can look at statistics as one, or research as one. But another one that we want to look at is just the blatant lie. That these we see increasingly often, where information is just made up, that things are said about someone that are not true. Now, sometimes it is taking information out of context to support this. But in these cases, the politician typically knows that it's not true or that they're misrepresenting or that they're distorting. Something I'll talk about in another video is how we can often use the complexity of political situations to do this. For example, we can take something that a politician says out of context or that they're saying in a very specific context and extrapolate it to others to distort their meaning. Again, this is often done intentionally. This is often done by news media intentionally as well. So it's not just the politicians here. So this is why we can look at the news media sometime and see things that are said by different news stations. For example, you'll sometimes see MSNBC and Fox News say the exact opposite thing, and both of them have supposed evidence to support them. Well, it's because they're misusing or they're going off of lies that were said, or they're just lying themselves. So we need to be cautious and to be critical consumers of information if we're going to really get a good understanding of the lies that are being sold to us as citizens of the United States. So let's come back then to that question of, are all lies equal? Well, I would say no, they're definitely not equal. They're all problematic, but there's a big difference between an honest mistake, an honest misinterpreting of something, reading just a small subset of the material on something to get a biased perspective, but doing it with good intentions. Lies that come out of this are not nearly as nefarious as what we're going to see with some other lies. When we get to the misuse of research and statistics, this is certainly a lot more concerning, as is the blatant lying. Now, which of these are worse? Well, that's I think a little bit more difficult to say, because it may depend on some situation. The deliberate misuse of statistics to support one's case and create misinformation, certainly this is problematic, particularly because it is giving the perspective of credibility. But we also see that these blatant lies do some of that same thing, and they're not based in reality. And it seems some politicians live by this idea that if you repeat a lie frequently enough, people are going to believe it. And the reality is that happens. We see that all the time. It's particularly nefarious with immigrants, as we will see. I'll talk about that in another short video reflection that I'm going to do. So we do need to really look at, what do these say about the character of the politician by the way that the lies are happening here. If it's intended to support a position but done with good intention, that's different than a lot of these lies that are with bad intention. But let me look at one other thing quickly before finishing this video about why all lies are not equal. Another place where we see lies being really problematic is when they're lies that are harmful to groups of people. When we see this misinformation being spread. Now, we can look at this in a couple ways again. Now, one, Democrats are frequently going to say a lot of misinformation, lumping all Republicans in together, and Republicans are going to generally share a lot of misinformation, lumping all Democrats in together. So Democrats might try to paint a lot of people as the far right, for example, and Republicans might try to paint people as the far left, as an example, to paint them as extremists, when sometimes this is true, but often it is not true. Again, it's a tactic, and it is used to try and create distrust of a group of people. But this is really disturbing when we see um, the lies and the misinformation targeting a more vulnerable group of people, a group of people that are not able to easily defend themselves. Immigrants are a good example of this. People experiencing homelessness are a good example of this. Often people in poverty with less financial and political power are other people that are going to be less likely to defend themselves. So when we look at these vulnerable populations and lies being spread about vulnerable populations, I would say these are particularly malicious and damaging, because they can lead to harm being caused. As we've seen in the last decade, some of these lies actually contribute to violence against these groups and threats of violence against these groups. They lead to situations where people are scared to leave their home because they know that people are hearing this misinformation about them, and they're worried about being subjected to violence because of these lies being spread about them. So I would say that these are some lies that we really need to speak out against when we're hearing lies that are targeting, that are misrepresenting vulnerable groups of people and marginalized groups of people. These are some that all of us have a responsibility to speak up, correct, and make sure that those are not left unchecked.